the regional center serves now 15 countries in the region, and it is really a very proud moment for us. This is the first side event we've ever hosted at the Conference of Parties, and it really is tantamount to the level of work that we've done in our region, as well as the sort of capacity we've built with our colleagues in the region, because we're sharing the presentation not only with BCRC team members, but also our colleagues from the Caribbean region. So today's event is quite detailed, and essentially we're going to show you what we've done under a particular project, under the JEF 5558 project, which seeks to reduce the amount of persistent organic pollutants in the Caribbean region for 8 countries. And essentially we've done it by thematic areas, looking at pesticides, looking at firefighting foams, and we actually have an expert on firefighting foams who worked in the region as well presenting. And we also even take you through the communication strategy and the core products that we developed for the Caribbean in order to treat with stopping persistent organic pollutants. So the presentations are split up, as you will see from the agenda, but I'm not sure if the agenda is, yeah, right? So we'll go through the BCRC Caribbean's ongoing projects, and then we'll take you into the NIP updates that have been done in the Caribbean, pesticides management, and then we go into the PFAS management with PCBs followed, the brominated flame retardants, and then we look at the public awareness, and that should take us just about to 7:45, okay? So let's, without further ado, I'll start the presentation, and can we go to the next slide, please? So as I said, the Basel Convention Regional Center is based in the Caribbean region. It's hosted by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, one of the most southern islands, the most southern island in the Caribbean basin. And we serve 15 countries, and the 15 countries include countries such as Belize, Guyana, and Suriname, which, though their mainland, have characteristics of small island developing states. The center assists parties in ensuring that their obligations under the convention are met. And not only do we treat coincidentally with the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention, but we've also put our feet into the Minamata Convention. Next slide, please. So as I said, there are quite a lot of projects we're doing. We are focusing on the JEF 5558 project, which looks at persistent organic pollutants specifically. This is a large-scale project, valued over $8 million, and we're into the 6th day of execution, and it will finalize this year. The other project that we're currently doing is the Islands program, which is implementing sustainable low and non-chemical development in small island states, and we've brought just over $21 million to the region to facilitate the execution of this project over the next 5 years. And it's a project that's being implemented not only with the UNEP, but also the FAO, as well as the IDB, Inter-American Development Bank. Next set of projects that we look at are smaller in size, but still very important. We're looking at replacing single-use plastics in Suriname, and this is being done through an SGP project through the BRS Secretariat. We've also done several Minamata initial assessments. We're on to number 10 for the region at present. We're also doing a national action plan for the government of Guyana. And we also are doing a mobile phone collection project called Hello, Helping Electronics Live Longer, which we've just launched for the government of Trinidad and Tobago, where we're going to collect mobile phones for the environmentally sound management and disposal. And as well, in keeping with the e-waste team, we are doing the electrical waste assessments for the governments of Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago, and also looking at the best case scenario for the disposal of these products in a regional manner. Okay, so now I'll have the pleasure of passing to my colleague, Janine Budram. Janine is the research analyst at the center, and she'll be taking you through the NIP updates in the Caribbean. Janine, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jewel. Good evening, everyone. Janine Budram, research analyst at the BCRC Caribbean. Next slide, please. Okay, so in this presentation, we'll run through some of the NIP updates that would have been conducted in the Caribbean. So as mentioned by my director under the JEF 5558 project, we've had the opportunity to complete NIP updates for 8 of the 8 beneficiary countries. We're also doing the NIP update for Guyana under a distinct project, and we are in the inception phase of a global project which is being implemented by UNEP under which the Bahamas and Dominica will also have NIP updates being developed. Okay, so with respect to the JEF 5558 project, the NIP updates were essentially conducted as one of the 5 activities under component 1 of the project, which aims to strengthen the human, institutional, and infrastructural capacities within the project countries for their compliance with the Stockholm Convention on PFAS. And we would have completed our development of the 8 NIP updates over the period 2018 to 2020, 2021, the most recent ones that would have been completed would have been for the government of St. Lucia and the government of Barbados. I have one more point. So under this activity, we would have also had the opportunity to develop a regional manual for the Caribbean for the update of NIPs. And under here, we would have looked at applications which are more relevant to the Caribbean region. So for example, with respect to the use of PFAS, we would have considered developing or doing your screenings as it relates to firefighting foams and aviation hydraulic fluids, which are the applications most relevant to the Caribbean. And some of the cross-cutting findings that we would have found across these 8 NIPs, firstly, with respect to the regulation of chemicals and pesticides in these Caribbean countries is usually regulated through the pesticides and toxic chemicals legislation, and a lot of the POPs that were generated in the Caribbean from waste consumer products. So for example, your waste electrical and electronic equipment, end-of-life vehicles with respect to PBDEs, and your industrial applications which release UPOPs. So some of the challenges that were common across all Caribbean countries would have been that restricted access to financial support for the analysis and disposal of POPs. We generally found also that there was limited capacity at border control to prevent and identify the import of POPs. And this also had links to your communication and coordination with other agencies, like your environmental regulators, who would also support the regulation of POPs management. Okay. So in that regard, there were common themes across the action plans developed under the NIP updates as well. So of course, to support with the inter-agency communication and institutional strengthening would have been recommended capacity building initiatives as well, to support with the lack of or limited capacity in the Caribbean region to manage POPs. There would have been measures and strategies considered for the disposal of stockpiles of obsolete chemicals, and considerations as well for alternatives to be used in place of chemicals and products containing POPs. And some of the more solid outcomes from these project outputs that we want to take the opportunity to highlight here today would include the development of a Model Integrated Chemicals Management Act. And some of the project countries, for example, Suriname, would have used this as a basis for the development of their Environmental Management Framework Act. And St. Kitts and Nevis is also attempting to push this forward in their cabinet, You'll also hear a bit more about the development of the empty pesticide container management plan and disposal of PCBs from my colleague Rachel. And we do have a consultant who supported with pilot projects to transition to PFAS-free firefighting foams. So you'll hear a bit more about that later. And I think that is it for me. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll pass you to your chair.
Thank you very much, Janine, for that quick update on the NIPS that happened in the Caribbean region. And I'll now invite Rachel, which is a joint presentation, which is being done with Mr. Anthony Mai here from the government of Belize on the pesticides management in the Caribbean. But before they start, I just want to acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources, Honorable Vaughan Miller. Welcome to the meeting. Thank you very much for joining us. So, okay, so Rachel, sorry, Bahamas, sorry, yeah. Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of the Bahamas. Yeah. And Rachel, you'll take us through the first part and then pass to Mr. Mai. Yes, pesticides management.
All right, thank you very much, Joel. Good evening, everyone. So as Joel mentioned, my name is Rachel Ramsey, Project Coordinator with the BCRC Caribbean. Good to be with you all. And so the purpose of this presentation really on pesticides management is to highlight two of the major outcomes of the JEF 5558 project, our milestone achievements. You would have noticed that Janine mentioned in her presentation that the NIPS demonstrated to us that generally POPs and highly hazardous pesticides are well managed in the Caribbean region because we have rigorous pesticides and toxic chemical control acts that are implemented via some really strong implementing boards that we have in the region. And so under this project, a few of the milestones that came through was the first one here is with a significant stockpile disposal. And this was actually conducted in collaboration with our good friends at the FAO, in that there's a simultaneous JEF project being executed in the region, the JEF 5407 project. And so the activities synergize, and in order to not duplicate efforts, what happened is that the BCRC Caribbean supported with the identification of some stockpiles of pesticides and PCBs, and the initiative for the disposal was facilitated under the FAO project. And so a significant tonnage, you'd see based on the graphic here, well over 100 tons of pesticides were successfully disposed of under the project in accordance with the synergies under the 5407 project. The next activity that Mr. Mai will take you through is one of those activities where we attempted to use residual project resources in order to demonstrate the implementation of the action plan items coming directly out of the NIP. And so in the National Implementation Plan for Belize, it was recognized that they had a priority need for the management of empty pesticide containers in Belize. And so in collaboration with the UNIDO, the implementing agency for the project, and the working group in Belize, we developed a short-term project, and Mr. Mai will take you through the achievements under that project. So Mr.
Sure.
Mai, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you all for being here with us today. It is critically important for us to convey all that we're doing within the Caribbean countries in regards to why we're here today. In January 2022, we hired a consultant to, again, look at the preparation and development of a management plan for empty pesticide containers. This was one of the activities that we identified within our updated 2019 NIP. So it was critically important for us to deliver on this. The consultant basically developed a roadmap in terms of what we need to do to be able to properly manage empty pesticides containers. Next slide, please. So we started off with a situational analysis. And so we needed to know what was occurring on the ground. And so the consultant basically went out, gathered all the information, and then used the presentation to do an assessment, identification and assessment of the alternatives. Thereafter, the consultant put the plan together to identify how we will put this plan into action, basically. And also the basic purpose of it, obviously, is to reduce the generation of UPOPs. Normally, these products would have been burned in open dump site. And so by having a comprehensive and a practical plan in place, we would have reduced the generation of UVAPs. Next slide. In terms of national context, Belize is, again, we are a successful food exporting country. 3 of our biggest exports are raw sugarcane, banana, and citrus. And you would see then that based on the situational analysis, the most pesticides or the areas that significant pesticides are being used are with regard to these 3 broad sectors. So Belize is not we are not a producer of pesticides, so everything comes into the country. Through the analysis, we estimated that there is about 390 kilograms, of empty pesticides containers that could be properly discarded of. And so the different classification of containers that the pesticides are imported in are barrels, drums, totes, plastic pouches, gallons, etc., etc. The current practice in Belize obviously is to, again, reuse, and also left behind in the field. Some are burnt and then dumped in municipal garbage, and there's a few that is returned to the various association, for example, the Sugarcane Association, the Banana Association, etc., etc. In any case, the consultant basically recommended to do more. We needed to do more in terms of managing it from a more practical standpoint. Next slide. In terms of the plan, the consultant developed some guiding principles. And again, when you want to develop any plan, we need to know what are our parameters of operation. And so it says the plan must be operated in a manner that ensures that there is no unacceptable health and safety risks with regards to the plan. The plan must be managed by the importer, brand owners of the products, and a partnership with civil society. The plan must strive to achieve the highest and most practical end-use product while following the 3R principles. And the plan must achieve reasonable high participation rates. Even though we agree that 100% is difficult to achieve, we have to strive for that basically. And it says the plan must provide reasonable accessibility to all users of the product to facilitate and promote the full participation of the program. And then the program must strongly encourage participation of all importers and brand owners basically, because the plan kind of suggests that we put some of the responsibility on these persons or these companies. Next slide. So the collection system is quite simple. It basically requires or suggests that we install 20 mini collection centers throughout the country. The country has been zoned in 3 particular areas. We have the northern, central, and southern zone. In addition to this 20 mini collection system, the consultant suggested that we basically establish 3 regional centers in terms of north, central, and southern zones. And then that the empty pesticide containers be placed within these mini collection centers by the farmers. And then they are trucked to the more central area, is compacted and then exported. Unfortunately, in Belize, we don't have full recycling. And so there's no repurpose of these plastic products. There is, however, a good program right with our next door neighbor, Guatemala. Right? Guatemala have this program called Cambio Limpio, which means clean camp or clean farm. They basically have a good program in place, and the consultant is suggesting that after we've compacted these empty pesticides containers, that we hand them over, export them to Guatemala for proper repurposing. That in a nutshell is what the program entails basically. So thank you for your time and your attention.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mai, for sharing the lessons learned from Belize. This project was really one that we've seen in the Caribbean region, where there's a clarion call for the better management of these pesticide containers. And we found that this particular case study in Belize worked really well. And what the center is going to do as well is develop a webinar to share the lessons learned from Belize for the rest of the region, so that we can only improve. Because as Mr. Mai indicated, there are some areas where things can happen a bit better and be done even better for your countries. So good to see that there's some action happening on the ground with these pesticide containers. So thanks, Mr. Mai, for your presentation. The next presentation is dealing with firefighting foams, and again, Rachel will do the introduction and the overview of that particular component. And we're joined here by Mr. Ike Pelzer, who was the independent consultant who assisted us in the Caribbean in 3 countries, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And he was actually able to come to visit despite COVID To some of these countries, not all. I know Kima felt a bit slighted because he did not make it to Trinidad and Tobago. But really happy that you're here with us, Ike, to share as well. So Rachel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jewel. All right. So good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. And so this presentation takes us through another one of those activities where we demonstrated the need to meet the outcomes of the national implementation plans in 3 of the countries. And so in this case, we had St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Trinidad and Tobago, where the action plan items prioritized included the need for the assessment of alternatives as it relates to the AKS film forming foams, the AFFF foams, in the firefighting industry particularly. And so in this case, once again, the countries were engaged in order to develop the projects. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, the working group there, they were instrumental in determining the particular elements of the project directly meeting the needs as it related to their NIP action plan. And in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Lucia, we worked closely with IKE to develop the project for those countries. And so, in essence, the projects across the board, all 3 looked at a situational analysis and made recommendations for the phase out of existing foam stockpiles. And then in several instances, the projects covered the implementation and training for said phase out, because understandably, the project resources could only take the countries to the level of capacity building and training, but the actual demonstration of the phase out has to happen at the national level. So I'll pass you over to Ike and he'll take you through the activities. Thank you, Ike.
Yes, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, PFAS in firefighting foam is the topic, and maybe some of you have been at the last COP or at the Pop Rock meeting in 2018 when we discussed the PFAS issue in firefighting foam for quite some length. I think it was several days taking just the issue of PFAS in firefighting foam. By then it was P4A. So next slide, please. And the reason for that is that firefighting foam is there to save lives, right? So the PFAS in the firefighting foam is actually there for a purpose, and it's quite obvious for why it is there. So PFAS is used in firefighting foam in a special type of firefighting foam, and that is called AFFF. Some other types like FFP and FP and so on, but the main type is AFFF. You need that firefighting foam at airports, but also at some fuel depots or so to fight fuels or fires of liquid fuels. And what AFFF does, or what the PFAS in AFFF does, is it forms an aqueous film. That's why it's called aqueous film forming foam. And that allows us to rapidly extinguish the fire and also to make the foam fuel repellent, if you want. So it the fuel sheds off, or the foam sheds off the fuel, and it doesn't burn that well, or it doesn't get destroyed that easily. So when replacing it, it's especially important to look at airports and fuel depots, and maybe at some other industrial facilities. Also, in some cases, municipal fire brigades have AFFF. Next slide, please. But what makes it particularly difficult is that the transition is not that easy. There are alternatives for PFAS-free foams, but it's not like a drop-in replacement where you can empty the foam tank or the foam concentrate tank, dispose it, and then fill in some new foam. You need to look, or you need to make sure that that the properties of the new foam are sufficiently well to make the foam work. And to do that, you need to look at some characteristics like the foam bubbles and so on. So all very detailed, that takes some time. And it's also very important, for example, to clean the system. So once you've emptied the foam concentrate, you need to clean the tanks and the systems to not have any cross-contamination from the old foam, from the PFAS in the old foam to the new one. So that's another issue we were facing. Next slide, please. So when it comes really to PFAS in firefighting foam, it's a little bit difficult because you find all sorts of PFAS in firefighting foam. Some of them have PFOS, which was restricted a few years ago. Some have don't have PFAS, but PFOA, and some have PFAS, which we are currently looking at in this COP, and it will hopefully restrict it soon. But also some other countries, like countries in the European Union, have looked at other substances. So to navigate through all these different PFAS, it's important to start with a situation assessment. And that is exactly what we have done. So next slide, please. The 3 projects we have done in St. Lucia, in Trinidad and Tobago, and in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you can see from the national implementation plans that the inventories of that are differing. So we have between 22, in some cases 47, in other cases 209 cubic meters of firefighting foam concentrate, mostly for the airports, but in some other cases, for example, in fuel depots. And that's where we started our projects. And next slide, please.
Pipette to take
You
the
can
sample.
see that we have
Put the pipette into the foam
started with an assessment. So we needed to take some foam samples and send them to a laboratory to really see, okay, what type of foam is it? When do it need to be replaced? Or by when does it need to be replaced? To really make an assessment that we are identifying the right foams for replacement. Assessment is especially important to really make sure that you are disposing these foams, disposing in the right way. And next slide, please. What was also very important was the next step, and that was awareness and training of the firefighters, especially. You need to understand that when you are a firefighter and you have AFFF, you're used to AFFF, and you have been told all the years that AFFF is the best foam concentrate and maybe the only foam concentrate that helps you fight these fires. So to help them get trust in these new foam concentrates, to understand the differences of these foam concentrates, we did some training. We did some tests with fluorine-free firefighting foams or PFAS-free firefighting foams. We talked about how to manage the transition, and we talked also about how to clean systems, how to prevent cross-contamination from the old PFAS-containing foams to PFAS-free foams. And yeah, that was what these projects compromise, and what the activities that we have done in these 3 projects. Next slide, please. And some information, if you scan that QR code, you find a YouTube channel, a little bit more information on the issues of firefighting foam. You can find some videos, how to clean tanks and how to take samples and so on. So if you're interested in that, you can feel free to look at that YouTube channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ike, for your presentation. Yeah, this was a particularly interesting project because, like the previous intervention on pesticides, it's really looking at the NIP and the action plans and really digging deeper and looking at what alternatives are there based on what was found in the NIP. And we're really happy that, we formed a great collaboration with you and that expertise you were able to bring to the region. So thank you very much. Okay. The next area that we're going to look at is polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, which is an important area for all of us here in the Caribbean, and like all of us globally, actually. And again, we're going to use one of the case studies from the region, and it's from Antigua and Barbuda, and we have Dr. Lenroy Christian here to support with his experiences in Antigua and Barbuda. And again, Rachel will provide the introduction on the particular area of PCBs, and then pass to Dr. Christian. So, Rachel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joe. All right, so under this project, the design of the project basically sought to address the issues surrounding PCBs in the project countries in a twofold manner. So in the first instance, a rapid inventory was conducted in 5 of the 8 countries, and this was in order to facilitate the mentioned disposal initiative that was undertaken by the FAO. And the second aspect of the project under component 4 delved a bit deeper into PCB management in the Caribbean, in that it made provisions for the development of specific national management plans as it relates to the country situations for the 4 project countries involved in component 4 of the project. And in addition to that, the project sought to bring additional analytical capacity building to the project countries because it was well recognized that there was need for this. And so Antigua and Barbuda is one of the project countries that participated in both aspects of the project, and that they were involved in the 2016 rapid inventory. And then we re-engaged to the end of 2019 to begin to work with Antigua and Barbuda also on the component 4. And so we have Dr. Linroy Christian here with us. He is the chair of the PWC in Antigua and Barbuda to take us through the activities. Dr. Christian.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you to BCRC for the work that they've done in the region so far, and I think a lot of work that's to be done. And I certainly look forward to future work with the center. Like Rachel would have indicated, the initial assessment that was done, we would have done so with well, my organization, Department of Analytical Services, and of course, our Antigua Public Utilities Authority would be the main stakeholder in this venture. We would have discussed with them the possibilities of PCB containing equipment where they could be old power stations where they would still be in place. As we found out, some were not so well disposed of, housed. We also found out as well that there are those that are still in service. And these transformers date back to 1935, the 1950s, and there are actually a few of them still in place. And this is actually an ongoing exercise, as we found after the initial assessment. So the few transformers that were identified, some had in excess of a few hundred parts per million PCBs. The old power station, which is, and there are a few of them that are no longer currently in service, but like I said, the equipment is still there. We had capacitors, breakers, and transformers that we initially identified. Another key stakeholder would have been our National Solid Waste Management Authority, who are also part of the project working committee. And their staff, as you can see, they were trained in some of the aspects of handling these contaminated transformers with these oils. And during the training with Polyeco, which was the consultancy firm that handled the repatriation of these transformers, we eventually would have had a total disposal rate of 8.27 metric tons. And those would have been shipped to Trédi in France in 2021. Now, these are just some basic photos of the process of transferring the contaminated oils. Again, one of the transformers were actually live, so they had to disconnect and refill actually. And so that transformer is now put back into service. The procedures, of course, were followed in accordance with the Basel Convention and also best practice. They were packed and housed. We also had some drums of new PCB-free oils that were used to refill some equipment as well. And according to outcome 4, there are a few key activities that were undertaken based on the assessment of the inventories that were in the National Implementation Plan. And of course, we would have developed this phase-out plan with the assistance of our Utilities Authority. And like I said, this is actually still an ongoing venture. The contaminated equipment were labeled, and which would take us into the next phase, where we would have conducted the second assessment. Next slide, please. And in that, we would have gone through screening of additional sites, a schedule of sampling was developed, and we identified the potentially contaminated equipment. The Department of Analytical Services, again, based on what we had in place, would have been able to test for PCBs in country, but we had issues with, of course, the equipment, because within our region, labs within the region, I think, face this challenge consistently with the maintenance of this type of equipment for testing. We collected samples and shipped them for analysis, but we also retained samples for future analysis as well and for interlab comparison reasons. And we identified 2 additional transformers in that particular exercise. One was a particularly large transformer, which is currently on site to be drained. But I think that will actually be disposed of on the Jeff Islands because of the challenges with that particular transformer. And then every time we actually go and speak to the company, we find about 2 or 3 more transformers. So, like I said, we really have to really have every time we think we've gotten to a particular point, we find a few more. And again, with the assistance of BCRC, we would have developed the guidance plan for this and the PCB management and the disposal plan, and the upgrade of analytical capacity we see as being critically important, and we have already taken up the upgrades, and so the PCB analysis within country is up and running, and we have further upgrades through other efforts with the IAEA to improve on testing in 2023 and beyond. So the Antigua Public Utilities Authority is our main partner in this, and this particular transformer, which has about 105 parts per million PCBs, is current focus, but it has proven to be a little logistically difficult, and we will certainly work on this going forward with the help of BCRC Caribbean. And I want to say thank you to my colleagues there. I'm a big fan of BCRC, Julie knows this, and the work that they've done in the region, and it is quite significant. And as you can see in the previous presentations, the sheer scope of work that was undertaken. So, and to my colleagues, Mr. Oman is here, Mrs. Josiah here, and they were part of the effort every day out in the field as well. So we're not just in the lab and in the office. I know Rachel had a good time going around some of these sites. So thank you very much. And that is our part.
Thanks very much, Dr. Christian. And we were going to take a question at the end, but I could indulge you. Yes, sir. Could you just state your name and which organization or country you represent?
Yes, I am Dr. Ramesh Kumar from SCRC India. SCRC India.
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to know what is the final mode of disposal of PCB in France?
I think incineration.
I think
Incineration.
Shreddy, yeah.
Shreddy,
Yeah,
incineration.
yeah.
The proper facility though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Under environmentally sound conditions, of
Sure.
course.
Can I ask?
Sure. Just state your name. Just state your name and which organization
Yeah,
you're from.
Piyush Mahapatra. I'm from a non-profit organization based in India. So I just want to know what is the average age of these transformer, means how old are these transformers? Basically, you find PCBs.
Well, the oldest one was 1935, I think. And we had some from in the 50s. Mostly they were from that are left back were within the 50s, because in the 1980s, we would have gone through a complete change out of a lot of transformers, but there are still a few that were left in the system. But most of 90% or greater of the transformers in the 80s were actually changed out. But what we found is that they were not disposed of well. The very large one, they had to move it. To move it, they had to remove the oil. But when you go back to ask, well, where is the oil that you removed to move the transformer? Well, we may have moved it somewhere else to refill other transformers. So but 50s, it was pretty common to still, and there's some that are still actually working from the 50s. Yeah.
Okay, I'll entertain one more question because we do, but we can come back to the question. So please state your name and I see.
want to ask a question regarding the previous presentation.
Could you just state your name and
My name is Yasser Abshanab from State of Palestine. I am focal point for Basel and the Stockholm Convention.
okay.
My question for the gentleman behind you.
Oh, the mic.
Regarding the empty containers of pesticides, you mentioned that you are going to package them and send them for recycling. Is there any specific procedure for cleaning these containers before packaging, or just leave
No.
it as?
Obviously, we have our technical person here with us, but we have reached out to Guatemala. So we wrote them to inform them that we are engaging in this project and that we want to engage in this project with a specific company. So Guatemala wrote back to us and indicated that they don't have the company registered to the designated authority as a company that could do this type of thing. So again, we liaise with the company. They provide us with additional information. We just sent that to Guatemala and waiting on a response from them. So again, there is a procedure that we need to go through. But according to what we have been told is that part of the program entails triple rinse. And so once you triple rinse a container, they are no longer considered hazardous. And so we are in the process of now determining how to move forward with that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, okay,
but we could discuss it further.
Yeah. okay. To answer the question, but before we go on, I have to thank Dr. Christian because I didn't get to finish that. But Dr. Christian, thanks so much for the presentation and sharing what happened in Antigua and Barbuda. The issue that you raised is the relevant one, and not only for the Caribbean, that each time you do a PCB disposal and you come back a month or two later, you find more. And the competing side event that's happening now with the Jeff has identified just this. And I believe the thinking is that with the imminent deadline of the PCB disposals that has to happen, the Jeff is going to craft a project where they're just really going to do a call and ask everyone to identify their stockpiles, safeguard them, because if you don't safeguard them, they mysteriously disappear, and make sure that all of it is finally disposed of in keeping with the deadline. So again, thanks again for sharing with us, and thanks, of course, for the recommendations. So now we move on to the brominated flame retardants, and this one, we're not only capturing the work done under the 55-58 project, but also additional work that's happening in the region with electronic waste. And this presentation will be done by Ms. Kima Gardner, right here to my left. And Kima represents the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And Janine will do the introductory chapeau and then pass to Kima. So Janine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joe, and good evening again, everyone. Okay, so as mentioned during the last presentation that I would have done, under the NIP updates, of course, brominated flame retardants are a key category that we wanted to capture. Some of the common exposure pathways, as most of you are familiar with, and which are also more relevant to the Caribbean, in the Caribbean context, would have been your end-of-life vehicles, furniture, other electronics, and insulation foam in buildings. So for the development of this inventory under the JAP 55-58 project, we would have considered a tiered approach. So regular desktop studies, consultations with your national stakeholders, and of course site visits. And this would have, within the Caribbean, the contaminated sites considered mostly entailed your landfills and waste management sites, as there was no separation of POPs containing materials prior to disposal. So based on some of the cursory data that we would have uncovered, we found that in comparison with the other Caribbean countries, Trinidad and Tobago would have been one of the largest, would have had one of the highest rates of PBDs in their countries. The sources considered here would have been your cathode ray tube TVs, other computer monitors, and electronics containing CRTs. and that's with respect to pre-penta PBDE. And with respect to C-octa BDE, we would have looked at polyurethane foams in vehicles, so from your upholstery and dashboards. For some countries, we did not have data available, so we wanted to indicate that here. And when I hand over to Kima to discuss the e-waste inventories for Trinidad and Tobago a bit more, this would provide a bit more context as to the levels of PBDE in the countries. To take you segue into Kima's presentation, we wanted to also introduce another IDB, an IDB funded project that's being done by the BCRC Caribbean in Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. The name of this project is the management of e-waste in Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. And there are 4 components under this project. The first of which deals with the development of an inventory and an e-waste assessment for the project countries. So we would have attempted here to demonstrate the practical guidance on the preparation of WE inventories. The method employed here would have been the put on market method. So this would have looked at your EEE imported versus exported, the amount that's exported. The manufacture of EEE in the Caribbean is quite limited, so this figure was generally negligible. And then from this figure, we would have considered the lifespans of the different categories of e-waste to assess the amount of e-waste that would be generated in a given year and try to assess the trends across certain years. So if we look at the put on market values across the 3 countries, again, Trinidad and Tobago does come in a bit higher here. We do find that this does correspond with the e-waste inventories, at least done for Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname under the 55-58 project. And so, of course, the PBDE inventories done under the 55-58 project. So, of course, your e-waste generated is, of course, again, higher in Trinidad and Tobago as compared to the other project countries. But we would have projected that for Guyana, this is expected to increase as this country becomes more industrialized. Okay, so at this juncture, I will hand you over to my co-presenter, Kima.
Thank you so much, Janine, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending firstly, and for staying on. Let me first, before I begin, thank the BCRC for this opportunity to present on behalf of the country and the Project Working Committee, or the National Working Group, as we call it for this project. So coming out of Janine's presentation, so as part of the e-waste inventory that have been done, a mass flow assessment that have been conducted or generated for Trinidad and Tobago, which essentially looks at the sources, pathways, and destinations for the waste. So I'm going to go through the figures with everyone. So as Janine would have indicated, the put on market, which is essentially import plus production minus export. She would have indicated that in the Caribbean, of course, production is pretty much negligible. So we're looking essentially at imports minus exports to get that put on market figure, which is that figure you see at the top, the 218.2 kilotons. So that was the amount essentially put on the market for the time period 2011 to 2020. That's the study time frame. Going on further, if we then look at the imports minus the actual amount of exports leaving, that figure essentially is what is replicated by the 218.2 kilotons that we see at the top there. Now, according to our Bureau of Standards, which looks at the electronic or does the testing for the electrical and electronic waste coming into the country, they have indicated that essentially 98.5% or so refers to new equipment, and so the remaining, let's say 3% or that remainder category refers to the second-hand industry. And so the figures you see on the left-hand side, the 214.4 would indicate that, and then the 3.3 would be those differences and those percentages there. So as we go through the mass flow assessment, we note that there's a difference between the amount that have been put on the market and then the amount of e-waste generated. And so that remain, or that balance, which remains as stock within households, institutions, corporate entities, that's that 151.7 kiloton figure that you see in there. We move across, going along. We noted that for the time period that the amount of e-waste that actually was collected is that 25 kiloton figure. So you're actually seeing those gaps coming up in the system where we see in the e-waste is starting to be lost as we go along through the cycle. And looking then as well at the amount that's actually going for formal recycling, we see that actually severely reduced to 1 kiloton based on the estimation. So just as a general as well, in terms of the figures that have been received from the study, we found that Trinidad and Tobago generated approximately 16 kilograms per capita of e-waste based on the findings. So moving on to the next slide, and zoning in specifically on one particular e-waste stream, looking here at mobile phones. Looking at Trinidad and Tobago's 2020 voice profile. So in 2020, the mobile voice sector accounted for the second highest proportion of revenues, as you can see in the chart at 18.6%, which is equivalent to 877.3 TT dollars, or US $146 million for that 2020 time period. Moving on to the next slide. That essentially is an indication that it accounts for about 53.7% of the total subscriptions for that time period, i.e. mobile voice actually accounted for the highest of all the industry subscriptions during that time period. And looking at the graph that comes up later, we see that this quantity is equivalent to 1.99 million mobile connections in Trinidad and Tobago, looking at 2020, so the very last figure on the chart there. And that essentially is equivalent to 142% of the population, which means, of course, that more than 100 persons, if you're looking at that as a baseline, have those mobile subscriptions in the country. And we're looking at subscriptions here in terms of activated SIM cards in the country. And so essentially we're using these figures as a proxy for the amount of electronic or mobile phone specifically connections within the country. And so we see then that we are really good at distributing these electronics to the market, getting it out there. However, we do have a problem with the management of these products. And so moving on to the next slide, we are very happy to announce that through the BCRC Caribbean, we have actually been able to participate in this project called Demonstration of the Environmentally Sound Management of Used and End-of-Life Mobile Phones in Trinidad and Tobago, which is actually a project that the BCRC submitted under the PACE program, and they were successful in actually being granted. So the images that you see are actually part of the whole launch, which I'll get to. So on the phone, we had 4 key activities that are part of the project. There is a national awareness campaign that is part of the project, essentially to raise awareness of the hazards of e-waste, but also to give an idea of the resources that can be harnessed from these devices. As part of the campaign as well, this national collection campaign is being done. And in the development of the characters, you see, we did ask for some gender balance. And so we got a female mascot also developed. So I introduced to you Selma in pink and Selwyn. You have to spell it for them. Sorry, yes. So that's Selma, C-E-L-L-M-E, and Selwyn, C-E-L-L-Y-W-Y-Y-W-N. And so this campaign entitled Hello, as Jewel indicated earlier, Helping Electronics Live Longer, is aimed at raising awareness of the harmful effects of mismanagement of e-waste and of course the benefits that can be realized from extraction of the highly valuable recoverable materials. So the other activities as well, you see demonstration of guidelines on best environmental practices. So the aim of the campaign is to, in the first instance, collect 10,000 mobile phones across Trinidad and Tobago, and then carry those for environmentally sound management. What we're going to do then is use a local e-waste recycler to test the MPPI guidelines on demonstration of environmentally sound management of used mobile phones. And then coming out of that, we'll also be testing the national infrastructural and technical capacity for actual refurbishment of these items nationally. And so in that process, then we're trying to, of course, build national capacity, see where the gaps, and then, of course, go beyond further.
And so the pictures you see are actually at the launch activity, which took place very recently, May 31st. We of course see our lovely director, Jewel, present at the bottom with the Minister of Planning and Development, who has responsibility for the Ministry of Environment within the country. At that ribbon cutting ceremony of the bid. The images on top are the key stakeholders in the process. So we have our solid waste entities, the two main mobile service providers in the country, as well as key stakeholders, including relevant ministries, environmental authorities, etc. And then that final activity, we sit to a national strategy for environmental sound management of mobile phones. So when that information is gathered from the testing, from the studies, then we're going to then develop that strategy to see where we can go forward. So we're very excited about this project particularly. I think the bins are going to be placed June 10th or so. 13th, week of the 13th. And so we're very keen and looking forward to this this initiative. So thank you very much. We're going to hand back over to Jewel.
Thanks so much, Kima. And really, we see the development of this and the way that we structured the presentation. You could see it flowed from the National Implementation Plan data, and then we're looking at the inventory of the e-waste. And fortuitously, Trinidad and Tobago, we were able to bring this project to them to look at the actual collection and environmental sound disposal. We're very excited about this particular campaign. I always tell everyone it's one of my favorite projects. And to the rest of the Caribbean colleagues in the room, we do want it to be a scalable project. So we will test it in Trinidad and Tobago. And hopefully the same concept can be applied to you. Maybe even you can use Selwyn and Selma, or maybe give them your flair and use them as the mascots going forward. But this is certainly a project that we want to do. It's been flagged. Mobile phone usage is quite high. I think Jamaica, if you look at the numbers, I think it's Jamaica, St. Kitts, Trinidad and Tobago are the countries from the Caribbean region that have the highest mobile phone usage. So it is an emerging issue for us, and of course, nicely deals with the PBD issue as well. So I think we're on to the last of the broad groups of POPs, and we're now looking at the unintentional persistent organic pollutants, which is a huge issue for the Caribbean region and globally because landfills often catch burnt, and we noticed that this is an issue across, especially in the Caribbean region, where you have the wet and dry season, and particularly in dry season, many of the landfills are burnt, and we have emission of very dangerous dioxins and furans to the public. And we have this presentation, which is being done with the auspices of the government of St. Lucia through Mr. Los Flores, and they've done a really nice project, which I am, again, maybe it's a toss-up between this one and mobile phones, but a project that I'm very, very, very keen about. It's composting and really trying to show that the organic matter that goes to the landfill does form the largest percent of what goes to landfill. And removing that component and getting an economic product from it is something that we really should consider. So Rachel again will do the introduction on the actual component, and then we'll pass to Mr. Les Flores. So Rachel, over to you.
All right, thank you, Jewel. Right, so this presentation will cover the activities conducted in collaboration with the government of St. Lucia. St. Lucia is one of the 5 project countries that were involved in this overall project component that deals with the reduction of UPOPs emissions by improving waste management practices, particularly at the landfills in the project countries, because as Jewel mentioned, this is where we recognize the need for improvement. There are some significant challenges. And so the project was conducted with us in collaboration with the 5 government agencies leading the project under the consultancy that was awarded to the Resources and Waste Advisory Group. And so how the project activity is designed is that it took a multi-pronged approach to the improvement of landfill practices, seeking to, 1, improve the operational and maintenance aspects at the landfill facilities or waste management facilities in some instances. And the other thing that we recognize was the need for source segregation and development. And in order to facilitate that also, the project needed to look at that interim storage of hazardous waste. Because of course, if you're diverting the waste from the landfill mass, what are we going to do with it? So the first activity looked at conducting some rigorous baseline studies, conducting needs assessments at each of the waste management facilities involved in the project. And then there was the design and delivery of a training module that was developed. Then we looked at the development of a core source separation strategy that gave consideration to the concerns of the region. So this is one of the outputs that gave major benefits to the wider project countries and then also the other countries of the Caribbean. In addition to that, the core strategies were then broken down where national separation strategies were developed, and these were piloted. In the case of St. Lucia, you'll hear about the diversion of the organic waste, the green waste from the mass. And then what we did was the design of hazardous waste storage facilities to provide that solution for interim storage. And so Mr. Les Flores will take you through the St. Lucia experience, the lovely St. Lucia experience. And then I'll come back and touch on a few of the additional benefits that we managed to deliver regionally under this project. So Mr. Les Flores, over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you to the BCRC. St. Lucia, I must say, is very much indebted to the BCRC because that has enabled us to undertake a lot of activities that that is critical to us. We were in a position where we could not have done it on our own due to lack of funding, because you know that COVID has affected our economy to a great extent because we rely principally, to a great extent on the inflow of tourists to the country. Okay, with respect to this activity, the baseline study, this was undertaken to inform the design and the strategies that would be employed in order to reduce UPOP's emission. Okay, the training and the workshops were undertaken for landfill personnel, including solid waste managers, supervisors, and also decision makers. Okay, this was achieved through administering questionnaires, undertaking surveys, undertaking site visits to the landfills, also to recycling facilities, and also meeting the stakeholders inclusive of key decision makers for solid waste management. And one of the key decision makers was actually the Minister of the Environment, because currently there is no levy for persons, or put it that way, there's no household levy, so persons do not pay for waste management. The authorities solely rely on government to provide us with the funding. Okay, can we go to slide number 3? Right. With respect to this activity, source separation, the authority focused on the management of green waste. Our waste composition indicates that green waste makes up over 50% of the waste deposited at the landfill. So if we could at least divert that green waste away from the landfill, it would free up a lot of space for us. As a small island development state, we really do not have available land, suitable and available land to construct landfills. We have one landfill in the island, which is well, for all intents and purposes, should be closed by next year, but we still see it has remaining about 5-6 years lifespan. Now, if we were to reduce that portion of green waste, at least 25-30% of that green waste coming into the landfill, that would increase the lifespan of the landfill. But not only that, for the past couple of years, the landfill was not covered on a daily basis. So you find a lot of the waste was exposed to a tremendous amount of space on the landfill. And this created a potential, a really serious potential for the emissions of UPOPs if the landfill were to catch on fire. So this project was actually very appropriate in enabling the authority to address particularly that issue. The green waste was diverted to a composting facility on the landfill, where the BCRC, through the JET project, provided us with equipment to manage that green waste. We are looking to actually expand the area where the compost has been undertaken, and we're looking to procure an industrial shredder, because currently the shredder that we have is not capable of shredding logs or wood in excess of 2 inches in diameter. Okay, so part of this project, we produce a PSA, which is currently being aired on a weekly basis on a number of television stations. And
Yes.
this is currently ongoing, and we could show you what that PSA looks like.
The St. Lucia Solid Waste Management Authority is calling on tree cutters, bush trimmers, landscapers, and transporters of green waste to segregate your green waste at the point of generation. Collect all grass clippings, tree trimmings, leaves, and branches and deliver it to our composting facility at the Deglo landfill. By composting your green waste, you are returning nutrients back into the soil in order for the cycle of life to continue. So play your part. Drop off your green waste at our Deglo composting facility. We're open daily except Sundays and public holidays until 4 p.m. Segregate and deliver. We'll do the rest for free. For more information, contact the St. Lucia Solid Waste Management Authority at 453-2208 or WhatsApp 724-5544 and 285-2762.
Okay, next slide, Rachel. No, not this one. No, this one, right? Okay. Originally, the project was supposed to provide designs for hazardous waste storage facility, but the authority felt at the time that the more urgent need was to improve the operations of the Deglo landfill. Okay, because we felt that this had the greatest impact for reducing UPOPs emissions. Like I indicated earlier on, the landfill waste was not covered for over 2 years. So you had a potential, a very serious potential for emissions of UPOPs if that landfill ever caught on fire. And in the past 4 years, we've had not this landfill, but the previous landfill that was closed. It caught fire on about 4 occasions in 3 years. Okay, so what happened is that under that component, we saw an assessment of the operations being undertaken, both the operations and maintenance. A report was generated, an assessment report, and also the report included conducting environmental monitoring assessment. Now, previously, the authority, from the time the landfill was constructed in 2003, there was a monitoring regime for groundwater and also surface water and leachate. But what this program did for us was to improve that monitoring regime. A number of wells which were constructed at the beginning were no longer accessible. So that project gave us at least one deep water well so that we could test the leachate from the landfill, and also re-establish a number of monitoring points around the landfill. So the project actually undertook an initial sampling regime. That the report was the results were analyzed, and it was assessed, and recommendations were made to the authority going forward. We also, under the project, there was also emergency response plan that was developed in conjunction with the Fire Department of St. Lucia, and also training of landfill staff with regards to emergencies, firefighting on the landfill, and also the discharge of the treatment and discharge of leachate. So all in all, the authority is extremely grateful for BCRC and the team the team at BCRC. And we are, of course, like I said, eternally grateful, and I've shared that many times with Joel and the team, so that we can at least realize, what would I say, reduction or preventing UPOPs emissions at the landfill. Okay, well, thanks again.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lestores. Before we close off, Rachel, let's have some additional benefits you just want to share on the project before we go to the last presentation.
Right, thanks again, Joel. So as mentioned previously, recognizing the overarching concerns in the region with UPOPs emissions, what we did was put the residual project resources under this component towards recognizing some additional regional benefits. And so one of the things that we did was we built an additional training capacity building workshop. And here we would have presented to the other project countries, the wider project countries, those major findings under this, under the studies conducted in the 5 project countries. And we presented in terms of best practices, what can happen in the context of small island developing states with a roadmap to resilient landfill management, the development of source separation of waste, the construction of hazardous waste storage facilities, given consideration to the need for it to be interim storage, understanding that the typical model for small states as ours is that you need to consolidate and then move towards disposal options. And then we looked at delving into guidance on the used tires. This was another significant contributor to UPOPs emissions at and around several of the landfills, used oil similarly, and medical waste. So specific guidance documents were developed in order to support the waste management authorities in this regard. The last part we have here is one that we recently completed that we're very excited about. Our director here has what she calls 2 a.m. thoughts. So that's when the bright ideas show up. And this one came from her in terms of developing an online compendium, something that's user-friendly and very interactive, that provides the findings, outcomes, and recommendations of the overall project that can benefit not just the region, but other countries internationally. So what we'll do is invite you at any point in time to visit the website at upops.bcrccaribbean.org. But we have a very short video that gives a snapshot of what the compendium does. So bear with us.
Okay, thanks again, Rachel, and again, thanks, Mr. Lestores. The composting project is one that, you know, we've not only done it in St. Lucia, but we're also doing it in Antigua and Barbuda, and we see the importance of it at a regional level, and we'll share the lessons learned, and the compendium is one of the ways that we can share the lessons learned. Mr. Lestores, I look forward to hearing from you the amount of organic waste diverted in a few months after having the entire system up and running. And look forward to probably even a product being developed. I know Antigua and Barbuda has opted to go this way as well and get packaging and so on. So again, thanks very much. So the last, we are running a bit short on time, so I'll try to be brief. The last presentation on the public awareness I will actually do. I will remove my mask because I struggle to speak with it on. In doing the work under the Persistent Organic Pollutants, the Center recognized the importance of sharing the information, not only for the region, but globally. And essentially, we decided to go and develop an entire communication strategy under the project. And it is all encompassing. There is we built out characters, as you can see here with the animation campaign. I think well, it says Caribbean music, or Caribbean type music. And we developed an actual website, which is proprietary, stopthepops.com, which you can visit. It is pinned to our website, but you can also visit it at stopthepops.com. And you'd see the entire slew of products that we've produced. We have produced characters which represent each of the 5 persistent organic pollutant groups. And of course, we looked at the audiences. So you'll see children, you'll see a pregnant woman, you'll see an old elderly gentleman, all trying to make sure that there's inclusivity in the campaign. Now, in addition to that, we developed several guidance documents. We have the COM strategy, of course, because we couldn't develop anything in absence of that. We developed lesson guidelines for the secondary schools, which is actually being used now in St. Lucia, and we're very happy for that. The debate competition guidelines were developed, but because of COVID, we haven't had the opportunity to use this yet, but hopefully one of the countries will take it up. And we do have the question and answer for media interviews to assist with breaking down some of the technical information that we share in an easier way. We also developed, and all of the ideas were driven by the countries, the participating countries in the project. They wanted to see a game, and the game is actually at the back of the room, and we're hoping that some of you might actually play it and we get some photos. We developed a full-size mat type approach, which is on the ground there, but we also have a desktop approach, and it follows if you know, the snakes and ladders type approach of the game. You answer a question in this one, though. It is a bit technical. And along with that, we also brought technology, and we did an actual AR game, which is available, regrettably, only on Google Play. Sorry to the iPhone users. It will be coming soon, though, but we'll tell you when. But yeah, we do have the actual game online, because the generation now, it's quite computer savvy. So the next slide will show the actual Stop the Pops national campaigns, and we've created banners, and one of those banners is there for each of the 5 categories of POPs, and each of the countries that participated received these banners and they used them, and we're very proud when we log into a meeting and we see all of the banners behind them. It always looks so nice. And in addition, we did several each country did unique national campaigns. For instance, in St. Kitts and Nevis, there was a massive campaign where they had radio talk shows. They actually had a competition for both primary and secondary school about persistent organic pollutants, where the students were asked to present verbally on their opinion on persistent organic pollutants. And we also had, the use of the game in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is there as well. All of the videos that we developed are translated for Spanish speakers as well. So because we do serve Cuba and the Dominican Republic, as well as Dutch for Suriname. We also did the training needs and assessment programs, and here you can see all of the different manuals that we developed, the ASM disposal, inventory, and monitoring of POPs, the capacity strengthening, which was done actually in collaboration with UNEP and the BRS Secretariat on Article 15 reporting requirements. We actually had all of the 14 countries we serve attending this and actually submitting their national reports at the meeting. And we also had another part of the project was looking at customs and border control, and this was facilitated through international consultants as well. In addition, we've developed the analytical method sampling, screening, and testing, BEP, of persistent organic pollutants manual, as well as the human health and ecological risk assessment of POPs as well, all available on our website. So really, I invite you to see the Stop the Pops website. It is really awesome. And the vision is, of course, that we won't leave it as a static website. We are going into what we call the Islands program, and we want to develop and add new characters and bring that life to that Stop the Pops campaign, so it will always be vibrant. So with that, I thank you very much, and I will simultaneously invite any questions because we are short on time, and I know many of you have to go to contact groups. So thank you very much. Yeah. Gentleman at the back, yes.
Nice presentation. Interesting developments happening in Caribbean. I have a question for Eki.
Mr. I, yeah, sure.
So actually, I'm from an organization, Toxic Spring. It's a non-profit organization, but we work extensively on research and other things in creation of data. So we have a plan to work with the Northern Water Institute on PFAS and other things. So just we try to develop some material information, but I try to understand, have we have done any inventory on export import of PFAS, to Caribbean country, from where it is coming, any production data, where it is being produced, and also what is the type means, what is the age means, I can say that this PFAS production periods means when it has been produced. Can you give some insight on that?
So yes, we haven't looked specifically in imports and exports. So we have looked at what is there at the fire services. So what we've done, we created first an inventory of all the firefighting foam stocks in there, and then took samples of each of the different containers and then analyzed them for PFAS to see really what's in there. But beyond that, we don't have any information on import and exports. We know where it's coming from because we know the brands, the manufacturers of firefighting foams. So we know the different products and so on, but not any specific data.
So I may write to you. We need some information on the production, also manufacturing data. Also, I just want to know, have you done any testing on the environmental metrics like soil, water, and
No, it was not my task.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for the question. Any more questions? Oh, yes, hello.
Hi, Clara Motura, Islands Program. Very, very impressive education and communication campaign. I was wondering whether you have any initial results, and of course the target audience, it's like children and people in school. And of course there has been COVID, but I was wondering with how many schools on average has been shared, and is this material being used?
So to answer the first question, before we've done the actual launch of the campaign, we developed a knowledge, attitudes, and practices survey, which we could share the results with you for the countries. And once the countries rolled it out, we are looking to do another round to see what changed. As it relates to the sharing of the information in schools, yes, there was COVID. So we are now seeing, we saw St. Vincent and Grenadines, but St. Lucia just recently used the game because they were able to actually share the game and have people participate. But it has been difficult with COVID. But
The national campus will actually report.
sorry.
The national campus will actually have reported.
Yeah, well, yeah. So Trinidad and Tobago insists that I say that we actually have the statistics for Trinidad and Tobago, and we do have it for many of the other countries as well. So we can share it with you, Clara. Yeah. Yes, sir.
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Before I go to you, Jonah, you had your hand up. Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Jonah,
Thank you very much, Antigua and Barbuda. Very interesting presentation. All of them very educational. A lot of great things happening across the Caribbean with the facilitation and assistance of BCRC Caribbean. I had a specific question as it relates to PFAS. I noted that, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, there was the inventory indicated over 200,000 cubic meters. My question is that what would be your recommendation when an alternative is identified as to what happens to the stockpile? Is it used out? Is it disposed of? Or what's the?
Oh, it certainly needs to dispose of, and the only way you can dispose of these types of foam concentrates is high temperature incineration. So a specific type of incineration that ensures, 1,100 degrees or centigrades. I think that's very important. It's not only changing the foam. Yeah, if you then, that is a risk. I have to say that because for firefighters, they don't want to waste any resources, right? If they need to transition, they are tempted to use it for training the old foam, and that certainly should not happen. So high temperature incineration.
And sorry, one follow-up question. You did mention quite a number of times the cleaning up the equipment. Yes. That would be a one-time exercise once
Yes,
okay.
One time.
Joe, can I at this point just interject? Thank you for that point, Joe, and thank you for your response, Ike. And I'd like to use this opportunity to request the BCRC that we will be looking for funding to get to that aspect of the transition process. I knew you put that plug there. I knew it was coming. Okay, keep on.
Yeah, on the islands, under the islands program, definitely we do have, because we recognize from the Jeff 5558 project, when we built the islands program, that we can get into alternatives. So we did cater for it, and it's there that we will look at alternatives. And it seems like it might actually be for the firefighting foams based on the responses we've gotten from the countries as well. So sir, I'll allow you to take the floor. Just state your name and your country organization.
I'm Dr. Wampo from Nigeria.
Okay.
I want to thank the presenters for enlightening us and educating us on what you are doing in the Caribbean region. We show that the BRS Convention Regional Center is very active and proactive. Most of the projects are actually speaking to the environmental needs of the people globally. So I thank them for these projects. But my concern are of two. One is the pesticide and pesticide container project. We've been able to safeguard them, which is really very, very good. But there is still need to look toward the disposal option, because in Nigeria we have actually safeguarded kind of waste stream, but the challenge there is the disposal. And if you allow it to stay a long time, it starts back negative to the health of the community while it's safeguarding the environment. So it's very key. The next thing I want to find out from the coordinator, executive director of this cell, whether these projects have a component that speaks to sustainability. It's not only, having this things done within the project duration, but there are plans built into these projects to sustain it so that it can, change the attitude of the people that geared towards sustaining these things and people living with it, and then let go of all those problems that were set on first instance to solve. So I want to know whether you have that and whether these projects, have it in the conceptual note.
Okay, thanks very much for the comment. And as it relates to the pesticides containers, yes, we know that the disposal is the biggest issue, and hopefully we'll solve that soon with the government of Belize and other countries. As it relates to your question on sustainability, I understand your point that these projects are for a particular time and at a particular place, and after that, what happens? But the way that we develop the projects, yes, they may be at a particular time and at a particular place, but we always try to ensure that the information is shared. Or sometimes if we have the funding, we allow the project to be for the country to build its own capacity. And a very good example is the composting project, where we were able to, through the auspices of the St. Lucia Solid Waste Management Authority, have that ability to give them the tools that they needed to start the project. And then once they started, they are empowered now to have that sustainability. The other part of it that we recognize, and that is why the center has invested very heavily on social media and website development, is through that Stop the POPs campaign, because we see it as a very important tool in raising the awareness on persistent organic pollutants, not only for adults, but for children. And you would see that the audiences that we are trying to reach, we do have technical material for the technocrats, the adults, but we also have very simplified information for children. And as I said in my earlier comment, we are looking to build out that campaign. So it's not just a static campaign. It will be a very dynamic campaign going forward, looking at the new POPs that are listed, getting into new characters, and even, trying to have synergies, because we also deal with mercury, and part of that Stop the POPs campaign, we also have a mercury, a Captain Minamata feature as well. So we try to have that nexus. So that's the answer to the question. In addition to that, the center has always tried to be very aggressive, use the word proactive, in ensuring that yes, we knew that the JEF 55-58 project was going to come to an end, and we actively sought to ensure that the countries were part of another program to ensure that the work does not just stop in 2022, but they have continuity now till 2027. And again, we'll take the same approach going into JEF 8 and start to access funding where we can to serve our countries and serve them very well.
You if you allow me just 1 minute to
Sure,
just to
sure.
be more direct with regards to your question with regards to the empty pesticides container. The consultant did recommend several options for sustainability in terms of financial sustainability. The first is obviously the extended producer responsibility concept, where the importer now has the responsibility to put something in place to get back these containers. Second to that, the consultant recommended either an import tax or a user tax, or a combination where the government will provide subsidy along with the association to ensure that it is managed over the long period of time. Now it is left up to the government to decide what is the best option for us internally, but sustainability was considered in the overall consultancy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there, Jonah, yes, sure, please.
I just wanted to add from the Antigua perspective as it relates to sustainability of projects, if I may.
Sure.
Well, even if we were to look at the communication campaign that is more focused on POPs, we in Antigua tend to piggyback on everything that comes out of the BCRC for other chemical management issues. So even if the campaign is focused on POPs, we will throw in pesticides and any other chemical management activities that we could use these available resources to address hazardous waste management. Anything we just lump it up together because we are all strapped for resources and we have to stretch the resources as far as possible. So seeing that the projects are country driven, it is our responsibility as governments to make sure that it does not end when the project ends, but it can perpetuate throughout various sectors in the country.
And if I could just add into to Jonah, so in the case of, I guess from a general project level as well, the activities are built in a way where they may be developed for a regional level, but then you have to adapt it to your national scale. And so in doing that is what it also helps with sustainability because you also have it being integrated into policy and then from policy into legislation and legislation into action. And so we see that level of sustainability as well. We're actually able to see the change at the national scale level as well. And so I think those things are incorporated as Ms. Batterson would have indicated within the body of the project itself. So
that's key. Yeah. Any more questions or comments? No? Oh, Melanie.
Sorry,
Melanie, you shouldn't be asking me any questions.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. I didn't
Sure.
say that. I've never seen this link before, but I was intrigued by the composting. So I get that 50% of material going into landfill in the Caribbean is compostable waste. But are you saying that there is data that shows landfills are more likely to burn if it's filled with organic waste?
Yes. Especially due to the climate as well too.
Okay, so this is something I didn't know when we've been developing JEF-funded projects. We sometimes struggle to link composting, and so with dioxin and furan.
It's something that I've struggled with the JEF, and that's why I'm very proud of the project because the issue with the JEF funding is that it's so specific to Stockholm. It's something you have to sell and let them understand that it's concomitant with them that the burning will release these dioxins and furans ultimately
you don't just burn organic, you're burning other things.
Yes, the commingling of the waste. And it's always difficult to get the funding, but we were very happy that we were able to bring the projects to both Antigua and Barbuda and St. Lucia.
Congratulations on doing that. I think that's great.
Can I say something?
Sure.
In addition to that, Melanie, if waste is not covered on a regular basis, then you have vast amount of waste exposed. With our high temperatures, most of the fires in the Caribbean, or as a matter of fact in St. Lucia, has been caused by combustion.
Combustion.
It's combustion.
Yes, spontaneous combustion.
Okay, so the flash point is by the heart.
Glass.
So that's why it's critical that if waste is managed properly, it's covered on a daily basis, then there's a less likelihood of landfill fires in St. Lucia or in the Caribbean for that matter.
Thank you for sharing that.
Just to add also, one of the key linkages that was recognized is that the green waste being introduced into your waste mass affects your compaction. And so it provides that oxygen in your fire triangle.
So then you get the flash.
Yeah, the source, yeah. So that was the other link, yeah.
Yeah, okay, any more questions? Yeah? So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for participating. Thank you very much. We also have to thank our presenters, so Kima, Marcellus Flores. Well, Dr. Christian had to leave because he had a contact group. I thank you very much, and of course, Mr. Mai. And of course, I have to thank Janine and Rachel who are here with me, but I also have a very awesome team back in Trinidad who helped to pull all of us together. So thank you very much, and we should be.
Well done.
Yes.
She's calling you by your first name or
People.